Ooh. Hey everyone, it's your boy B3, back with another kicking TV show review. Today we are reviewing a show from the Amazon Prime video streaming service, Invincible, Season 1. I have read all the comics, so this review will very likely contain spoilers for not only the show, but also maybe the comics, so keep that in mind. If you want to see my review of the entire Invincible comic series with all the tie-ins, I reviewed it in 3 videos on the main channel, Godzilla and Gigan, which you can find in our Linktree link in the description below. Invincible Compendiums 1 through 3. 3 separate videos. The last one was uploaded 2 days ago. So definitely check that out. But yes, I did just watch Invincible on Amazon Prime. There are a lot of changes, but there's also a lot that's faithful. Many things in the story were changed, but also many things were the same. Like, the feel of the show is the same. The spirit of the show is the same as the comic, and that's really what's important at the end of the day. Now, it's about Mark Grayson, who is the son of the greatest and most powerful superhero on the planet. He begins developing his powers, and he becomes the superhero known as Invincible. And both the show and comic are about him kind of growing up and becoming this great hero. Yeah. So, we have a lot of great changes in the thing. So Mark's friend William is openly gay at the beginning of the show, and he doesn't come out for a long time in the comics. In the comics, he's kind of a womanizing jerk at the beginning, and that's because he's like not only hiding his sexuality from others, but from himself. And if you're a jerk to women, then you don't have an excuse for women not dating you. Well, you do. That is the excuse. You know what I mean? But he's just kind of openly gay and not as much of a jerk, but he can still be a little emotionally insensitive in this. I thought that was a good change. Bad change is probably the biggest spoiler for the season and the first really big spoiler for the comics. I would say a bad change would be how they handled Omni-Man's betrayal. A lot about it was good, but I don't know, because in the comics, Omni-Man defeats the Guardians of the Globe incredibly easily. Like, super easily, right? Really just like one hit for each of them, including the Immortal. And he doesn't take the damage, and no one suspects him because he just kind of leaves the scene after and stuff. But in this one, it's a huge fight with the Guardians of the Globe. He takes a ton of damage. In fact, for the beginning of the season, a lot of people like suspect that he was beat up alongside them, and they just failed to kill him. They just thought he seemed dead and left him, and he survived. Which wasn't the case. He just kind of got his ass beat when he was killing them. And I don't like that. It makes Omni-Man seem weaker. I mean, as the show goes on, they make up for that. You see some really great feats of strength. But in the comic, the ease at which he defeated the Guardians of the Globe really set a standard of power. Really established how strong he was. That he basically, for all intents and purposes, defeated the Justice League, because that's what the Guardians of the Globe are. Wild. And then, also, throughout the entirety of the show, a lot of people just know he did it. Like, that demon detective, who I think is supposed to be like a Hellboy kind of character, he's like onto it the whole time, and he's kind of a joke in the comic, and he's barely even really in the comic, but he actually had a pretty decent part in this show. I think he was treated better in the show than he was in the comic, which is actually very interesting. Also like his character design in the show better, a little bit also. And then like Debbie Invincible's mom and Omni-Man Nolan's wife figures it all out herself, and so does the tailor, and Cecil pretty much has it figured out almost right away. And it is suspicious that Omni-Man was found there, someone who's not a member of the Guardians of the Globe. And he's there with them, and he's the survivor. It's suspicious, right? Yeah, it's extremely suspicious. And that kind of, I feel like, took away from the impact of the ending. Because you know that there's something wrong with him and he's actively hiding stuff, and that there's something bad going on with him. In the comic, they show you, after all the Guardians are killed, that it was him. But then they never show him doing anything bad. They never show anyone suspecting him until he reveals his intentions to Mark, Invincible, at the end. And so you, as the reader, are explaining away his behavior, right? Because they don't show him do anything else evil. Like, you as the reader are like, oh, he must have been mind controlled, or it's a clone, or it's someone disguised as him, or he's got a split personality. Like, you as the reader, every time you see him do something wonderful and being a good husband and father and saving the planet, if you're wondering what those noises are, someone's being grumpy. But you see him do all these things, and you're just like, that's not a villain. That's not a bad person. And then you get to like issues 11 and 12, and you're traumatized for life. You know? But, so see, in the comic, you're explaining away his behavior. You're like, he is not a bad guy. Something is up. There's some kind of mystery. But there isn't. He just did it. And that reveal hits you fucking hard. But in the show, he did it. And you know it was him. You just don't know why. So you read the comic and you're like, he didn't do it. He couldn't have done it. We have to find out how it wasn't him. But you watch the show and you're like, yeah, he did it. But why? It's not as impactful. And I don't think it allows you to care about Omni-Man as much as the comic did. But there were some other good changes. I liked the changes with Amber, Mark's first girlfriend in the series, and I believe first girlfriend ever. She was kind of generic in the comic. A lot of the time, she was like, yeah, it was a weird thing. Because, like, she and Adam Eve just kind of were both white, middle class, like, generic high school girls, like, character design wise. And so you really could have swapped their heads and not even have known that there was a head swap. You know what I mean? It was... But here they give her, like, well, one, they change her race, so you certainly can't. So they're really trying to make her different. But they also give her, like, a much more unique sense of style. They really separate her visually from Eve, and they also just make her a better character. But the relationship with her seems to move a lot faster in the show than it does in the comic. But that's fine. They had her learn that he's invincible way faster. Like, she figured it out by herself when they were still in high school, and he told her when they were in college in the comics. So she figured it out pretty quickly. But lots of the same problems are still there. But yeah, a lot of good changes and some bad changes as well. They added this kaiju to the show, and look, my main channel's name is Godzilla and Gigan, right? I love me some kaiju, right? I'm a kaiju dude. That is my main thing. But even I was like, the inclusion of this kaiju seems almost pointless. We don't even get to see Omni-Man's first battle with it. And then the second battle with it gets interrupted by the Immortal, and Mark has to defeat it, but he kind of just defeats it because it steps on a power line that he grabbed, and it just gets electrocuted, and that's it. And it's like, that's kind of stupid. The kaiju almost seems to just be in there because monsters have kind of gotten big recently. People are really digging monsters, and even kaiju specifically, kind of. So I think they were just trying to cash in on the popularity of monsters these days. Not the popularity of maybe kaiju specifically, but just the popularity of monsters in general. That kaiju felt like a cash in. Good design, though. Very cool Lovecraftian kaiju. Neat look. I'd get the fig. I really liked the animation. It was good. There were some parts with the animation where I was like, like it got a little lazy or something. Like there's this one part where Mark and Amber are kissing, and they want to show them going down on the bed, but instead of showing them like actually lay down, it just kind of shows their character models descend in this rigid, what would be almost impossible way. And I was like, that's a little rushed and lazy. And then there's this one part where Omni-Man gets hit by a laser from a satellite, and it kills like all the birds in the surrounding area, and like all these crows drop to the ground, but all the crows are in the same exact pose when they hit the ground. Some of them are just mirroring each other, but they're all the same crow, and it's very obvious. And it's just like, that's lazy. That's just actually lazy. They were trying to save time and money or something, but I don't know. There were just little moments in the animation like that where it was like, But other than that, animated very well and pretty true to the comics art style. Also, I could see lots of the seeds being planted for future stories as well from the comic. I want to talk about the acting. Pretty damn good. I've never seen J.K. Simmons in anything bad. They cast an Asian actor as Invincible, which is good, because Invincible is half Asian, which I feel like a lot of people forget because his dad's white. But yeah, Invincible. His mom, another change is she's a real estate agent at the beginning of the show, and they barely even mention his dad's job, which is as a writer. He's a travel writer. And his job as a writer, I feel like maybe should have been touched on a little more. It's basically mentioned only 2 or 3 times. But, like, his day job was a writer, and he also worked for the government as a superhero. So he was getting paychecks from both, but his books always just sold okay. And it was easy for him to do travel books without spending a lot of money to make them, because he could just fly to the place and back home, and etc. And he didn't have to spend a lot of time making the books because he could type at super speed, Clark Kent style, etc., etc. But that's becomes very, very important. His career as a writer actually becomes extremely important in the comics at one point when they're trying to figure out ways to defeat his people, the Viltrumites. I'm not going to go into all that, but let's just say he tried to be a sci-fi writer at first, but it wasn't science fiction he was writing, if you catch my drift. So, yeah. And one of my favorite comic characters of all time, Alan the Alien, is in the show. And he's voiced by Seth Rogen. And Seth Rogen did a fucking fantastic job with Alan the Alien. We also have J.K. Simmons as Omni-Man. And I've never seen J.K. Simmons do anything poorly. He always does a fantastic job. Always. You know what? Her name skipped. I was looking at the cast list before this video, and her name has slipped from my mind, but the Asian woman from Grey's Anatomy plays Debbie Grayson. She did a great job. Everybody did a pretty great job on the acting. I don't think anyone did a poor job acting-wise on this show. And we had some good names. A lot of people you've heard in some of the DC animated comic stuff, I believe, were in this, which is pretty cool. You know, that the DC animated movies had some people in this. Yeah, just pretty great job all around. Once again, it is a lot of the smaller comic stories aren't in it, like the 1 or 2 issue stuff, like the one where he has to go to frickin' Atlantis or whatever they call it in Invincible and marry a fish woman, and he has to get out of that. Like that's cut, and a bunch of little stuff like that is cut. I still got stuff with Titan, you know, the guy that can put on the rock shell. I actually like him more in the show than in the comic. They did a lot of great changes to him by giving him a wife and a sick daughter to really help motivate him. And in the comics, he's like a bad person, but mostly by circumstance. And in the show, he's like a good person, but for the sake of his family and even for others, he can be willing to do bad things. Like, yeah, so in the show, he is a villain, but he's a villain that could be redeemed if he really wanted to. And in this show, he's more like an anti-villain, if that makes sense. A lot of people forget that anti-villains are a thing. I hear people call anti-villains anti-heroes all the time when they're not. Because Red Hood wasn't always an anti-hero. There was a time when Jason Todd Red Hood was an anti-villain. Let me sit up real quick. Sorry, I'm getting very uncomfortable because I kind of maybe have a broken rib. I do have a broken rib, according to the doc, but I'll make a vlog about that at some point. Probably, maybe. I don't know. Go with Crest. But yeah, Invincible was great. I'm glad that the best comic ever written is getting a TV show that's very faithful to the spirit of it. I'm excited to see where they take the show in the future. And yeah, it had a lot of changes, but some things it even did better. And it's faithful to the spirit. That's what's important. 8 episodes. Each of them kind of lengthy, but still pretty good. But, oh, excuse me. That is it for Invincible Season 1. And I cannot wait for Season 2. Thank you all very much for your support. Remember, if you want to see my review of every Invincible comic, check out my Invincible Compendium reviews on the main channel, Godzilla Guy again. Link in the link tree down below. I'll also have more stuff coming out in the future. I'm going to do some cosplay creation videos on my Patreon because I have some Power Ranger cosplay stuff I'm doing for a con. If you want to see that, the link to my Patreon is down below. And I'm going to a con in the future that will likely be content for this channel. I'll probably record every day what happens every day. And that'll be fun. I just really like where the channel's going right now and where all my media is going, and I think we're gonna have a good time. That is it. Thank you all once again for your support, and I'll see you all next time.